Unit 7, McCarthyism and the Red Scare. Learning Objective, Politics and Law. Discuss the U.S.'s broad political reasons for entering World War II and how those motivations and wartime experiences informed post-war policies and the Cold War. Lesson Agenda. I do. Introduction. We do. Guided reading and check for understanding. You do. Independent practice. Introduction. The Red Scare. During the 1950s, rumors and accusations spawned fears that communists were trying to take over the world. The Red Scare began in September 1945, when a clerk named Igor Gonziko walked out of the Soviet embassy in Ottawa, Canada, and defected. Gonziko carried documents showing a Soviet effort to infiltrate government agencies in Canada and the United States, with the specific goal of obtaining information about the atomic bomb. The case stunned Americans. It implied that spies had infiltrated the American government. Soon, the search for spies escalated into a general fear of communist subversion, or an effort to weaken a society and overthrow its governments. In today's lesson, we will discuss the Red Scare and its impact on the United States and its people during the 1950s. Check for understanding. 1. What was the Red Scare and how did it start? The Red Scare was a period of fear and suspicion of communist infiltration in the United States during the 1950s. It started in 1945 when a Soviet clerk defected in Canada and carried documents showing a Soviet effort to infiltrate government agencies in Canada and the United States. Guided reading. The Truman Loyalty Review Program. In early 1947, President Truman established a loyalty review program to screen all federal employees. The program was created in response to growing concerns about communist infiltration in the United States and the fear that communist sympathizers or agents might have infiltrated the government. The program required all federal employees to undergo a loyalty screening, in which they were asked a series of questions about their political affiliations, associations, and beliefs. Between 1947 and 1951, more than 6 million federal employees were screened for loyalty, a term that was difficult to define. A person might become a suspect for reading certain books, belonging to various groups, traveling overseas, or seeing certain foreign films. The Federal Bureau of Investigation scrutinized some 14,000 people. About 2,000 quit their jobs, many under pressure. Another 212 were fired for questionable loyalty, despite a lack of actual evidence. Despite the controversy, the Truman Loyalty Program remained in place until 1951, when it was replaced by a less controversial loyalty program that allowed for greater due process protections for employees. Check for understanding. 2. What was the Truman Loyalty Review Program, and what were its effects? Witch hunt in the Senate. Joseph McCarthy was a U.S. Senator from Wisconsin who rose to national prominence in the early 1950s by leading a crusade against alleged communists and their sympathizers in the government, military, and entertainment industry. McCarthy's tactics were marked by a lack of evidence and a willingness to make false accusations, which he used to ruin the careers and reputations of many innocent individuals. The period of political repression and fear that McCarthy helped to create became known as McCarthyism, and it had a profound impact on the American society, politics, and culture. McCarthyism was characterized by a climate of fear and suspicion, with many Americans being falsely accused of communist ties or sympathies and subjected to public scrutiny, harassment, and even imprisonment. The McCarthy hearings, which were televised nationally, became notorious for their sensationalism and lack of due process, with McCarthy making wild accusations and engaging in public confrontations with witnesses. The atmosphere of McCarthyism was also characterized by censorship and blacklisting, with many individuals being denied employment or having their careers ruined due to allegations of communist sympathies. Despite the eventual downfall of McCarthy and the decline of McCarthyism, the legacy of this period can still be felt in American politics and culture today. The tactics of fear-mongering, demonizing political opponents, and making false accusations have been repeated by politicians and political groups throughout history, and the dangers of political repression and censorship remain a potent reminder of the need to defend free speech, due process, and civil liberties. Check for understanding. Who was Joseph McCarthy, and what was his role in the Red Scare? What was McCarthyism, and what impact did it have on American society? HUAC and anti-communist investigations. J. Edgar Hoover was the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation for nearly 50 years, from 1924 until his death in 1972. During that time, he oversaw many famous investigations, including those into organized crime and communist activity in the United States. He was also a strong supporter of the House Un-American Activities Committee, the HUAC, which conducted numerous hearings and investigations into alleged communist activity in the U.S. during the 1950s. These investigations often involved surveillance, wiretapping, and other intrusive techniques. Many people were questioned or interrogated by the FBI during these probes, and some were even blacklisted or lost their jobs as a result. The HUAC hearings were often highly publicized and highly controversial. Despite all of the controversy surrounding these anti-communist activities, Hoover and the FBI continued their investigation through the 1950s and 1960s. In many cases, they were able to uncover actual instances of communist activity within the U.S. government or private industry. However, they also caused a great deal of fear and paranoia among innocent Americans who were simply accused of being sympathetic to communism. Check for understanding. 5. Who was J. Edgar Hoover, and what role did he play in anti-communist investigations? 6. What was the House Un-American Activities Committee, and what was its purpose? Hollywood on trial. One of the HUAC's first hearings in 1947 focused on the film industry. HUAC looked at film as a cultural force that communists might manipulate to spread their ideas and influence. Future U.S. President Ronald Reagan was head of the Screen Actors Guild at the time. When called before the HUAC, he testified that there were communists in Hollywood. During the hearings, 10 writers used the Fifth Amendment to protect themselves from self-incrimination. They refused to testify, and this group became known as the Hollywood 10. In response, Hollywood producers created a blacklist, a list of individuals in the entertainment industry who were believed to be communists or communist sympathizers. and who were subsequently denied employment in the industry. The blacklist remained in place for many years and had a devastating impact on the careers and lives of those who were targeted. Many Hollywood figures spoke out against the HUAC hearings and the blacklist, including prominent actors like Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, who formed a group called the Committee for the First Amendment to protest the hearings. It wasn't until the 1960s that the ban on blacklisted individuals was lifted, allowing some of them to return to work in the industry. The Hollywood blacklist remains a dark chapter in the history of the entertainment industry and a cautionary tale about the dangers of political witch hunts and censorship. Check for understanding. 7. What was the Hollywood blacklist, and how did it come about? 8. Who were the Hollywood 10, and what was their significance in the Red Scare? Alger Hiss. Whittaker Chambers was a magazine editor and former Communist Party member. In 1948, he told the HUAC that several government officials were also former communists or spies. One official Chambers named specifically was Alger Hiss. Hiss was a diplomat who had been part of the Roosevelt administration. In this role, he had attended the Yalta Conference and helped organize the United Nations. Hiss sued Chambers for libel, lying about a person. In spite of that, Chambers testified to the HUAC that in 1937 and in 1938, Hiss had given him secret State Department documents. Hiss denied that he was a spy or a member of the Communist Party. He also denied that he knew Chambers. The committee was ready to drop the investigation, but then Californian Representative Richard Nixon convinced his co-workers to continue the hearings to find out who had lied. Chambers turned in copies of secret documents. He also had microfilm, film with small pictures that he had hidden in a hollow pumpkin. The secret papers and microfilm became known as the Pumpkin Papers. These pumpkin papers, Chambers claimed, proved Hiss was lying. A jury agreed and convicted Hiss of perjury or lying under oath. The Rosenbergs. Another spy case centered on the accusations that the U.S. Communists had sold secrets about the atomic bomb to the Soviets. These secrets could have helped them build a bomb in 1949. In 1950, the hunt for spies led to the arrest of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. This New York couple belonged to the Communist Party. The government charged them with spying for the Soviets. The Rosenbergs denied the charges. They were sentenced to death for spying. Many people believed that the Rosenbergs were victims caught in a wave of anti-communism. Appeals and pleas for mercy failed, however, and the couple was executed in June 1953. Check for understanding. 9. What was the impact of the Red Scare on civil liberties in the United States? 10. How did the legacy of the Red Scare continue to impact American politics and culture after its decline? Independent practice. Copy the chart below into your notes. For each individual or group, list the significance of their role in the Red Scare and the outcome of each. End of lesson. Make sure your name, date, and class period are in the upper right-hand corner of your paper. Turn your completed assignment into your class's assignment tray.